Hi besties and welcome back to my trash channel. This is part 2 of this Sakuatsu one shot, so you should probably watch the first part first. Anyways, on with the video. 𝗚𝗚𝘚𝘀𝘀 trotted down the stairs with a half-pout, half-flustered expression on his face as he tried his best to cover his face with his hand. Unfortunately, the drinks station was in the living room, a poor choice of where to put it in his opinion. No doubt someone by now had spilled their drink on the white carpet, but it ultimately meant that he had to talk with them, and he had no interest of answering questions as to where he'd been. He sighed to himself before walking to the entrance of the living room. The door was still closed and seemingly untouched from the last time he had been there. He placed his fingers on the handle and slowly opened the door, instantly being hit by a loud and large amount of voices speaking to each other from all different directions. He squinted and almost wanted to cover his ears. How could they even be able to manage this amount of noise? It was much more peaceful with Sakuatsu. To his surprise, he was unfortunately noticed, some of the voices quieting down a little into a more manageable tone as they turned to look at him. He was walking around the back of them to the drinks table. 𝗚𝗚𝘚𝘀𝘀, where have you been? He turned his head back to one of his closest friends, 𝗚𝗚𝘬𝘀𝘀, who he had just walked behind, giving a small, nervous smile. Oh, hey. Yeah, where have you been 𝗚𝗚𝘚𝘀𝘀? Wait.
I'm in love with the shape.
Yeah, where have you been 𝗚𝗚𝘚𝘀𝘀? Ugh, nowhere special. I'm just here to get a drink. What? No, join us. No, 𝗚𝗵𝘀𝘀𝘀 is waiting on me. His voice quietened as he said the word 𝗚𝗵𝘀𝘀𝘀, which 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀 must have took note of, smirking as he looked up to him. He was cross-legged and sat on the floor, sat next to Hinata and 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑚𝑖. Oh, so you're with Sakuatsu, huh? 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀 shot him a middle finger, his cheeks heating up, and 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀 laughed as he continued to walk away and grabbed himself a drink, pouring himself a cup of juice. Maybe he understood why Sakuatsu didn't want to get him a drink now. He thought for a moment before deciding to pour Sakuatsu one too. He didn't want to come back down a second time. He began to walk back, 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀 sending him another comment that only made his cheeks redden further, but he decided to ignore him this time, walking out of the room and half slamming it behind himself. He leaned back on the door, taking in a deep breath, trying to settle his flustered state down before he walked back to meet Sakuatsu. The last thing he wanted was for him to see him like this. He eventually calmed himself down, stepping away from the living room door and making his way back up the stairs and towards 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝑀𝑖's room, where Sakuatsu was sat on 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝑀𝑖's desk chair, playing on his phone. Blood rose to his cheeks again. It seemed all the calming down from earlier was for nothing. He placed the cups down on the desk, instantly grabbing the attention of Sakuatsu. You sure took your time. It's not my fault. It's utter chaos down there. Sakuatsu looked down at the desk, at 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀 picking up one of the cups and reaching it towards his mouth and taking a sip. You got too? Thirsty, I guess. No, it's for your dumbus. Oh. Sakuatsu rolled his eyes and leaned forward, reaching his hand out to grab the second cup, then leaning back and holding the cup to his chest. Oh right. 𝗚𝗵𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀, go put that sheet on your head. That should not be a normal sentence. Just shut up and put it on. I need to cut your eyes out. You're gonna what? Ugh. You know what I mean. No. All I'm hearing is that you're going to cut my eyeballs out. I mean cut your eye holes out. What? In the sheet? 𝗚𝗵𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀, stop playing with me. You know what I mean. Sakuatsu chuckled to himself, finally taking a sip from his cup and then placing it down on the desk, watching the pouting 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀 with slightly flushed cheeks. Wouldn't the smarter way be to draw a circle with a pen around my eyes, and then cut it out once it's off my head? 𝗚𝗚𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀 thought for a moment, crossing his arms. Maybe, but you already did it the other way to me, so I got to do it this way to you. Is this your excuse as to how you're going to cut my eyes out? Just draw two circles. No, 𝗚𝗵𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑀. I put my eyes at risk, so now you have to do the same. I'm not letting you do that. Do I look insane? Yes. Definitely. Sakuatsu scoffed, looking away from Atsumu to pick up his drink and harshly take a sip from it. Atsumu chuckled to himself, noticing how his smile stuck to his face as he looked at the side of Sakuatsu's face. He could get lost just by looking at him. Sakuatsu eventually sighed, turning his head back to Atsumu and looking him in the eyes, quickly snapping Atsumu out of his short daze. Just don't poke my eyes out, okay? I kinda need them. Blind people exist. You can live without eyes. Well, I'd rather not do that, so promise me you won't make me go blind. I wasn't planning on in the first place. Promise. What? Promise me you won't stab my eyes out. Omi, who do ya think I am? Of course I won't. I promise. Sakuatsu let out a long and drawn out groan, leaning back and looking at the ceiling. He eventually turned back to look at Atsumu, who was chuckling while looking at him. Fine. I'll do it. He frowned and stood up from the seat, glaring at the sheet for a moment before grabbing one side of it up from the floor and bringing it to his chest. He was about to pull it up and over his head but decided to shoot Atsumu a death glare first, still being able to hear his loudening laughs. I hate you. He then pulled it on top of his head, looking over to where he thought Atsumu was stood with a scowl, even though he couldn't see his expressions. He heard the boy let out a laugh that drew nearer to him, letting Sakuatsu know that he was walking up to him. You look ridiculous, Omi. What, am I meant to look like him ready to walk along the red carpet? Atsumu scoffed, placing an unexpected hand at the back of Sakuatsu's head that the spiker let out a small gasp to. The hell? A warning next time. Shush, just sorting it out. It isn't central. So, I can be a quirky ghost. Sorry, Omi, but you have to be like the rest of the other ghosts today. Sakuatsu let out a quiet, short chuckle, Atsumu blushing almost instantly. He would gladly listen to his laugh on replay for the rest of his life. He was glad that Sakuatsu wasn't able to see, meaning he could fanboy all he wanted and Sakuatsu wouldn't know a single thing. Be finished sorting out the sheet so that it was visibly central, but he left his hand to rest on the back of the spiker's head for a moment, melting into his presence. Though he couldn't leave it there for a long time, he would seem weird, so he removed it. I feel like I'm going to fall over. Can you hurry up and cut out the holes? I'd like the ability to see. Geez, be patient or I won't hesitate to remove your ability to see permanently. What's even taking you so long? Just pick up the scissors and cut the fabric. It isn't exactly rocket science. Alright, fine. Geez, just give me a second. You make it seem like you want me to stab your eyes. He smiled to himself, his cheeks still painted a light pink as he walked to the bed to pick up the scissors, staring at the blades for a moment before walking back to Sakuatsu, or what could be described as a weird, curvy pole. He raised his free hand to search where he thought Sakuatsu's face was, his own only becoming a more pigmented rouge shade. He eventually found where he thought Sakuatsu's eyes were, the spiker letting out a groan and cussing as the blonde pushed at his eyes. Do you mind? What? Just marking it so you can see. You want your eye on your forehead or something? You don't have to push at my eye. It fucking hurts. You did the same to me, so you have no room to complain. Just stop poking at my eyes. Alright, fine. Just stay still. I never moved. Stay still, Omi. Atsumu placed his hands either side of Sakuatsu's face, revoking any movement the boy's face originally had, though he soon removed them, pinching the material covering Sakuatsu's left eye and reaching the scissors over to make one clean cut. His whole body felt hot, his cheeks now feeling physically warm. Maybe the heating had been turned on, or maybe it was that he'd never been so close to Sakuatsu ever before, or that he'd barely laid a finger on the boy before and now he was laying his hands all over his face, shaping out a circle at Sakuatsu's eye. He was eventually done with the first eye, his hands trailing to his side as he looked at the floor, Sakuatsu's dark eye coming into view and looking into Atsumu's eyes, but the golden eyes didn't look back. His eyes widened and his breath hitched, seeing the less obvious than what it probably felt blush lined all along Atsumu's cheeks. He decided to not comment on it, though his heartbeat began to change its pace. Are you going to cut the other eye out or what? You said I couldn't be a quirky ghost. That means I can't just have one eye. Just shut up. Atsumu's voice was low, he taking a step closer to the spiker. He knew the second eye was going to be a lot harder. Sakuatsu watching his every move like a hawk with his left eye. He could practically feel Sakusa's hot breath on his face. That only made him even more flustered. Sakusa clearly took note of it, but he pretended like nothing out of the ordinary was happening. Sakusa's heart was beating so rapidly in his chest he wouldn't be surprised if the blonde had heard it. He was so close to him, and he didn't want to push the boy away as he reached the scissors up to his right eye and cut a line just beneath his pinched fingers. He then began to cut out a circle within the slit, taking in a physically visible gulp. Sakusa watched the boy's whole body tentatively, watching how his whole body moved, though he mostly admired his face and the obvious blush covering it. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝘀𝘀 was just about done with the second eye and made the mistake of meeting the gaze of Sakusa for a split second before looking back to the sheet. But it only took that one moment for Sakusa to notice the nervousness and the flusteredness hiding within them. He decided to speak up. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝘀𝘀. The words cut into the silence, startling the blonde, who let out an unexpected gasp after hearing the voice, his eyes once again meeting Sakusa's, though this time for a longer length of time. His mouth was slightly parted as he tried to gather his words. 𝗚𝗵𝘇. He felt inferior against Sakusa's unreadable stare, his arms slowly dropping to his side as he considered himself finished with cutting out the second eye. 𝗚𝗢. Though he had nothing to say after that, taking a step closer to the blonde so that their faces were practically touching, 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑚𝑢's blush escaping to his whole face, though he daren't take a step back, instead losing himself in Sakusa's eyes. He took in a deep breath, leaning his forehead so that it was pressed up against Sakusa's and unexpectedly raising a single hand to the side of Sakusa's face. The spiker's eyes watched his every move, though mainly focused on the boy's eyes. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢 gulped once again. 𝗚𝗵𝘇. He traced his fingers down where Sakusa's jawline was through the fabric, dampening his lips with his tongue as he closed his mouth for a second before planting a long-awaited kiss to where he thought Sakusa's lips were, wetting the material separating them both. They stayed there for a moment, 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢's eyes nervously closed and Sakusa the same until they eventually parted, 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢 taking a step back as he covered his face with his hand, shielding his cheeks and hiding himself from embarrassment. 𝗚𝗵𝘇. His eyes darted to where Sakusa was shuffling, grabbing at the sheet until he was able to lift it over his head. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢's eyes instantly looking everywhere but the boy in front of him after seeing his whole face. But the spiker took another step closer to him, resting their foreheads against each other for a second time and looking deeply into the setter's eyes. 𝗚𝗵𝘇. Yeah, you, I. Sakusa closed his eyes, drawing his lips closer to 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢's until they eventually met, though this time there wasn't anything separating the contact. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢's eyes went wide for a moment, though he soon melted into the kiss, lacing his fingers up to the spiker's face, pulling him closer into himself, and Sakusa tracing his arms to the blonde's waist, grasping the boy into him. They separated for seconds, but then going back in, hot breath meeting one another's faces. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢. Sakusa finally said as they parted for a longer length of time. 𝗚𝗵𝑇. He placed another quick peck on the setter's lips. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢. I like you. You. Yes. I like you, 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢. More than you probably know, and I have for quite a long time. You like me. Sakusa nodded his head, one of his hands traveling up 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢's side and to the blonde's face where he rested it just beneath his jawline. You, 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢. Me. It must have hit him at that moment about what was happening, his cheeks bursting an even deeper red as he tried to look anywhere but Sakusa, but the spiker used his hand to guide his face to his own. Yes, you, 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢, and it's always been you. 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢 was a flustered mess, clasping his hand to his face, his mind telling him to pull away from their closeness, but his heart wanted to linger for a little longer. 𝗚𝗵𝑇. Yes. 𝗚𝗵𝑇. He couldn't stop himself from pulling Sakusa back into his lips as he smiled into the kiss. Even laughter of pure joy escaped his mouth at moments. 𝗚𝗵𝑇. I like you too. You do. Yes. I like you, 𝗚𝗵𝑇. Holy shit. I didn't think you would. Just I. He stopped himself before he could ramble further, his gaze directing itself to the floor as he covered his mouth once again, though not enough to stop himself from speaking. 𝗚𝗵𝑇. Yeah. I like you. You like me. Me. Yes, you, and only you. Sakusa watched as 𝗚𝗚𝘗𝑀𝑢 made the widest grin he had ever seen and looked up at him with his joyous, teary eyes. Sakuatsu couldn't help but let out a small chuckle followed by a grin that was probably just as bright as 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀's, his own eyes becoming damp with tears. He pulled the blonde in closer for a tight hug, peppering kisses all over the boy's face, 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀 giggling softly like a child in reply, and Sakuatsu couldn't get enough of it. 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀. Yes. You're like me. MHM. And I like you. Yes. Holy shit. 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘬𝘀, 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘬𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘬𝘬, 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀. Yes. Yes. What? He giggled once more, pressing another joyous kiss to Sakuatsu's red lips, his arm hanging around the spiker's head to pull him closer. I like you, 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀. I know. You've said it like 100 times. Oh. Oops. He let out a nervous laugh, his own hand tracing to the back of his own head. Though I wouldn't mind hearing it again. 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀. Oh my god. I like you. I like you a lot. I like you. I like you too, 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀. 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀. He let out a deep breath, his eyes looking up to meet Sakuatsu's, who were already lovingly staring back. Yeah. Yeah. Sakuatsu smiled. He must have understood what the setter was trying to say, rubbing the side of the blonde's face as he spoke. Of course I would. Dash. Where have you been the whole night? I was starting to get worried. Komori half shouted at Sakuatsu from the bottom of the staircase, who had finally appeared, walking down the stairs with his hands stuffed in his pockets and an expressionless face. Sakuatsu looked over his shoulder, surprised to be met with a floor full of sleeping people tucked comfortably away in sleeping bags. I asked you a question. Why is everyone passed out on the floor? Passed out? They're asleep. It's gotten late, so they all decided to sleep over, and that includes us. Anyways, don't dodge the question. Where have you been all night? Sakuatsu scanned the area, eventually finding where his backpack was leant against the wall in the corner of the room. At least Komori had picked the best place to sleep. He completely ignored the libero's question, instead beginning to walk over to his stuff and to where 2 sleeping bags were already settled out on the floor. Kiyumi. Don't shout, you'll wake them all up. Practically everyone was asleep, apart from them and the twins, who were sat together at the opposite side of the room, talking to each other with one of their phones on flash mode so that they could actually see. Sakuatsu and 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀 shared a short glance for a moment, barely visible in the dark, but it didn't stop Sakuatsu from smiling as soon as he turned away. 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀 had left Sakuatsu 10 minutes before in order to make their leave less suspicious, though it didn't exactly affect much and they'd probably do better if they had just came back together, but it seemed the right thing at the time. Why do you keep avoiding the question? Where have you been? Sakuatsu began to settle himself down on one of the sleeping bags, only looking at Komori when his cousin also sat down, a look of slight worry on his face. It's nothing to worry about. I've just been with 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀 all day. 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀? And it's 2 fucking a.m. Kiyumi. What could you two have possibly been doing until 2 a.m.? I did it. You did it. Sakuatsu shuffled, pulling his legs up to his chest, his cheeks displaying a subtle hint on pink as he looked over to 𝗴𝘬𝘬𝘀𝘀 and then back at Komori. I did the dare. You. What? Keep your voice down. What do you mean you did the dare? I kissed him. Komori sat there startled for a moment, trying to figure out what to say. You know I wasn't serious about the dare, right? Of course I knew. I'm not an idiot. I don't know. It kinda just happened, and I liked it. Wait, you liked it? Wait, tell me about it. What's happening with you two now? Shut the fuck up, Komori. Stop shouting so loudly. How can I if my cousin, and idol, germophobic, people hating, bitch, tells me he just kissed his crush? Well, he's not exactly a crush. What? What do you mean? I kinda have a boyfriend now. What? Dash. Finn. Hi besties. I hope you enjoyed the video. The only thing I really want to say is that I see a lot of comments saying you're back and stuff like that. I just wanna remind you that I have a community tab where I post updates on what I am doing and stuff like that. So if you're ever confused, I've probably said something on there. Anyways, have a great day and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye besties.